The Galactic Council Hall was silent, its walls gleaming with the polished surfaces of hundreds of species from across the universe. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors sat in their seats, their eyes focused on the lone figure standing before them. He was an alien diplomat from the Orcs Confederation, small in comparison to the towering Kroth giants, but his presence was commanding. His skin, a faint blue hue, trembled as he stepped forward. His heart raced, but his voice remained steady as he spoke, every word laced with a growing sense of dread. "Please," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but carrying the weight of a warning to the council. "You do not understand the threat you are facing. The humans. Do not provoke them. I beg of you. I've seen their history. I've seen the fire they can bring. You think them weak, but you are wrong. You will regret this." His plea echoed throughout the chamber. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive, as the council members exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and amusement. The Orcs diplomat, known only as Varun, took a slow, shaky breath and continued. "I have studied them. Their history is full of violence, yes, but also something else, something dangerous. A drive to survive, to fight, to push beyond their limits. You don't understand what they are capable of. You." "Enough," interrupted a voice from the back. It was Sarath, a Kroth warlord, his deep, rumbling voice sending shivers through the chamber. He was a massive figure encased in thick metallic armor that shimmered in the light. His eyes, dark and emotionless, locked onto Varun. "You speak of humans like they are gods, but they are nothing, primitive, emotional creatures. Their technology barely keeps them alive in the depths of space. They are no threat to us." The Kroth warlord's words were like a slap to Varun's face. But he didn't back down. He stood tall, shaking but determined. "You don't know them. They fought wars among themselves, terrible wars, but they survived. They have technology beyond what you think. You have no idea what you are dealing with." The council shifted uncomfortably, but most were unmoved by Varun's plea. They had heard stories of human violence before. They had seen humans struggle to survive, but they had never seen them as a real threat. To them, they were just another species in the galaxy, one more race to be dealt with. "We cannot continue listening to this nonsense," said Aelra, a member of the Alethar, a race known for their telepathic powers. Her voice was cool, but there was an edge to it. "The humans are small and weak. We've watched them for centuries. What could they possibly do to harm us?" "Their technology is backward," added Zarak, a being of fluid form from the distant Uruk system. "They are barely able to travel beyond their own star system. They are no different from the hundreds of species we have dealt with." Varun's face grew pale, his fingers twitching nervously. He knew this was coming. He had begged for this council to listen, but the arrogance of these beings, their pride, blinded them to the truth. It was always the same. The Orcs Confederation had learned the hard way, and now he feared it was the entire galaxy's turn. "You will regret this," he said again, but his voice cracked this time, his eyes wide with fear. "They are not like the others. They will strike back. They will retaliate." The council's laughter was harsh, cutting through his words like a blade. The Kroth warlord, Sarath, stood and gestured grandly to the council. "We are the mightiest force in the galaxy. No race has ever been able to stand against us, and if they dare challenge us, we will crush them as we have crushed all others. Your warning is unnecessary, Varun." Aelra's lips curled into a smile. "You've spent too much time in the company of weaklings. The humans are nothing but a fleeting annoyance. We will take care of them quickly." Varun turned his head, locking eyes with each of them. His gaze was filled with desperation, his voice nearly a whisper now, but there was no mistaking the panic in it. "You don't understand. If you strike them, they will fight back, and you won't stop them. You can't. You'll see it too late when they are already tearing your fleets apart. I've seen what they can do. I've seen it with my own eyes. The humans are capable of things. Unimaginable things. Don't provoke them, please." But the council was not listening. The decision had already been made. The council's laughter still rang in the air as Varun turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, a weight of despair settling over him. He had failed, and the galaxy would soon pay the price. 3 days later, the Kroth fleet arrived. At first, there was nothing. No warning, no signs of a threat, just the dark expanse of space. Then, without warning, the Kroth warships entered Earth's orbit, massive and menacing, their hulls gleaming with deadly intent. Hundreds of massive ships, larger than anything the humans had ever seen, prepared to strike. The first missile struck a remote part of the African continent. The explosion was deafening. It didn't just destroy cities, it decimated entire regions, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind. The planet quivered under the force of the Kroth's wrath. Earth's defense systems, outdated and overwhelmed, did their best to retaliate, but it was clear they were no match for the Kroth war machines. Humanity was caught off guard, unprepared for the onslaught, and yet there was a strange sense of calm within the chaos. The Kroth had underestimated them. Back in the depths of the galaxy, Varun watched from his ship, his heart in his throat. He had tried to warn them, but now it was too late. The humans were about to show the galaxy what it meant to anger them. Varun closed his eyes, whispering a prayer to whatever gods the Surix believed in. It wasn't enough to save them now. The humans would not be so easily defeated. And the galaxy would soon learn, never underestimate humanity. The first missile had been fired with no warning. It tore through the atmosphere and hit Africa with an explosion that shook the planet. For those who had the misfortune to witness it, it was like watching the Earth itself bleed. The Kroth fleet, colossal and merciless, hovered above the planet as if to remind the humans of their helplessness. It was an attack meant to break their spirit, to crush them before they even had a chance to fight back. But the Kroth were wrong. On Earth, panic erupted. Cities fell silent as people stared in disbelief at the sky, watching the horror unfold before their eyes. In military bunkers, officers scrambled to understand the scale of the attack. Earth wasn't prepared for this. Humanity's technology was far behind the rest of the galaxy, and their warships were old, clunky things compared to the sleek, powerful vessels of the Kroth. Admiral Rachel Quinn stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Fleet, her eyes locked onto the screen displaying the devastation from space. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "All units, stand by. This is not over." She had been in command during minor skirmishes before, but this was unlike anything she had ever faced. The Kroth had just declared war, and their ships were already above Earth, unleashing hell. Their missiles had wiped out entire cities in mere seconds. Her mind raced, but she refused to let the fear show. "We need to launch a counterattack," Lieutenant Morgan, her second-in-command, said urgently. "But we're outgunned. Our fleets are outclassed, Admiral." Rachel's gaze hardened. She had led humanity through so much, through countless struggles. This wouldn't be the end. Not today. "No," she replied, her voice sharp. "We will not run. We will not surrender. We fight back. All ships prepare to engage the enemy. Rally every fleet, every reserve unit. We're hitting them hard, and we're hitting them now." She turned to face the communication officer. "Send a message to every corner of Earth. We are not helpless. We are not broken. The Kroth will regret this. They will learn who they are dealing with." Far above Earth, the Kroth fleet hovered like a dark storm cloud. The enormity of their ships, each one larger than a city, cast long shadows on the world below. The Kroth were a race built for war, rough, brutal, and unyielding. They had never lost a battle, and they were sure this would be no different. Captain Goran, the Kroth commander, surveyed the destruction with a smile. "The humans are weak," he muttered to himself. "They are nothing. A flash in the pan, one strike, and they'll beg for mercy." His voice boomed through the comms to his fleet. "Keep the pressure on them. No retreat. We'll destroy their capital cities next. Let them feel the full weight of our power." But something was wrong. There was an unease in the air. The humans hadn't broken. The usual fear and desperation that came with an overwhelming attack wasn't there. Captain Goran frowned, his instincts kicking in. Back on Earth, Admiral Quinn paced in front of the large digital display showing the movements of the Kroth fleet. Her eyes narrowed as the sensors picked up something new. A small group of human warships, barely a fraction of the size of the Kroth armada, moving into position. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Admiral, they're preparing to launch a counterattack," Lieutenant Morgan said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's a long shot, but we have no choice but to go forward." Rachel stared at the screen, weighing the risks. Her mind churned with calculations, strategies. "Send out the message to the fleet. Tell them to hit their weak points. The Kroth may be stronger, but they are not invincible. If we can force them to split their forces, we stand a chance." The order was given, and one by one, the human warships, their sleek forms now appearing like specks in the grand expanse of space, began to move. The fleet was small, fewer than 100 ships, but each one was crafted with one purpose in mind: survival. They were built for speed, for agility, and most importantly, for hitting fast and hard. Humanity wasn't about to fight in the same way as the Kroth. They would use their greatest strength: adaptability. In space, the first human ships met the Kroth forces head-on. The vast black expanse lit up with a sudden burst of energy as the humans fired their first volley of missiles. They were far from powerful compared to the Kroth's weapons, but they were fast. Too fast for the larger Kroth ships to target easily. One human warship, the Resolute, led the charge. Its captain, Commander Jacob Stone, barked orders as the crew scrambled to avoid incoming fire. "Focus on the engines, aim for the weak spots, don't give them time to react." His voice crackled with urgency over the comms, but the crew didn't hesitate. Each ship in the human fleet was brimming with the kind of resourcefulness that had kept humanity alive on their homeworld for millennia. And that was something the Croth didn't understand. They relied on sheer strength, not strategy. In the midst of the battle, a human fighter pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Calloway, dove into the chaos. His fighter, small but deadly, weaved through enemy fire, dodging plasma blasts. He was just one man, but his courage was all that mattered. He locked onto the massive Croth destroyer and fired a precise burst from his ship's cannons. The blast struck the destroyer's underbelly, sending ripples of shock across the Croth vessel. The enemy ship shook, its shields faltering for a split second, just long enough for the next human ship to deliver a crushing blow. The Croth fleet faltered. The human ships darted and dodged, their weapons hitting with pinpoint precision. The Croth, who had relied on their size and strength, were now struggling to keep up with the unexpected speed of the human assault. They were not used to fighting like this. The smaller, more agile human ships would not face them head-on like prey. Instead, they attacked from every angle, forcing the Croth to defend in ways they had never planned for. But the Croth weren't done yet. Goran's voice thundered over the fleet's comms. "Destroy them, they will break under the weight of our might." The Croth retaliated with fury, their weapons burning the void of space, but it was clear that the tide of the battle had shifted. For every human ship that was damaged, another surged forward to take its place. They fought like a swarm, unpredictable, relentless. And then it happened. The Resolute broke through the enemy lines. It was a long shot, but it worked. The flagship of the Croth fleet, a monstrous dreadnought, was in its sights. With a roar of engines, the human ship fired its last, most devastating weapon, a concentrated pulse of energy so powerful that it left a glowing trail across the stars. The blast hit the Croth dreadnought squarely in the heart of its shield system. There was a brief moment of silence. Then the Croth flagship exploded, sending fragments of metal and flame drifting into the void. The humans had done it. They had struck back. In the midst of the destruction, Admiral Quinn stood before the screen, watching as the Croth began to retreat. There was no time for celebration yet, but one thing was certain. The humans had fought back, and the Croth had learned what it meant to provoke them. The galaxy would remember this day, and the Croth would regret ever underestimating humanity. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Croth, the most powerful race in known space, had suffered a humiliating blow. Their flagship was gone. Dozens of their warships had been reduced to wreckage. Earth, a planet they had once seen as weak and insignificant, had struck back with a vengeance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Jacob Stone allowed himself a single breath of relief. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had pushed the Croth back, but the fight wasn't over. He knew it would only get worse from here. "Report," Stone barked, his eyes scanning the holographic display in front of him. His crew worked frantically to patch up the damage from the battle, each one pushing themselves to their limits. But it was clear that the Croth would return, and when they did, they would be angrier, more ruthless. "Captain, we've lost 2 ships," Lieutenant Morgan's voice came through, tight with tension. "But the rest are holding strong. We've pushed them back for now, but the Croth won't just let this go." "I know," Stone replied, his face grim. "They'll come back with everything they've got. Get ready, this isn't over." High above Earth, the remaining Croth warships regrouped. The impact of their losses was felt deeply by their leadership. Their pride had been wounded, and the thought of defeat was unbearable. Captain Goran stood on the command deck of the largest surviving Croth ship, his massive form towering over his officers. His eyes burned with fury. He had underestimated the humans, but he would not make that mistake again. "We will return to finish this," he growled, his voice echoing in the chamber. "We will show these pathetic creatures that they are nothing in the face of the Croth. Prepare the fleet for a second wave. We will raise their cities. We will break their spirit." The officers around him nodded, their faces a mixture of anger and determination. But Goran knew something they didn't. There was more to the humans than what they had seen so far. Their tenacity, their resilience, it was like nothing he had encountered before. He had heard of the human desire to survive, their will to push forward against all odds, but it was different now. The humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. On Earth, the tension was unbearable. Admiral Rachel Quinn stood in front of the giant screens in the command center, watching the status reports coming in. The battle had ended, but the war was far from over. The Croth were regrouping, their second wave already forming. Quinn's face was set in hard lines. "What's our status?" she asked, turning to Lieutenant Morgan. Her eyes betrayed no emotion, but inside a storm was raging. Humanity had won this first round, but the next battle could be their last. "We've taken heavy losses," Morgan replied, his voice grim. Our ships are damaged, but the fleet is still intact. We've lost a few colonies, but the majority are still standing. We need reinforcements, Admiral. Quinn nodded, her thoughts racing. There was no way to hold the Croth back without more firepower, but where would they find it? Earth had always been on the edge of technological advancement. Sure, they had the best weapons humanity could create, but it wasn't enough. The Croth had the advantage in size, power, and sheer numbers. We need to go on the offensive, Quinn said suddenly, surprising everyone in the room. We can't wait for them to hit us again. If we want to stand a chance, we need to strike first. We need to hit them where it hurts, right at the heart of their forces. But Admiral, we don't have the ships for that kind of strike, Morgan protested. We're outgunned. We may be outnumbered, but we've got something the Croth don't have, Quinn replied, her voice cold and fierce. We've got our people, we've got our drive, and that is more than enough. Far away in the depths of space, Lieutenant Marcus Calloway, fresh from the last battle, looked up at the stars as his fighter's engine hummed softly. He was a symbol of humanity's defiance, a single pilot in a small craft, but with the heart of a warrior. He had taken part in the most dangerous strike of the war, and somehow they had won. But even now, he knew the hard part was only just beginning. His comms crackled to life. Lieutenant Calloway, you're being summoned to the bridge of the Resolute. Immediate briefing. He sighed, taking one last glance at the stars. There was no time to rest. The war had only just begun. The Resolute was already preparing for its next mission. The damage from the first wave was significant, but the crew was determined. They were patched up, ready to go again. It was a grim feeling on board. Everyone knew they were outmatched, but there was no turning back. The Croth were coming, and they would not stop until Earth was no more. Commander Stone stood at the front of the briefing room as his crew gathered. Calloway entered, looking as weary as everyone else. We've got one shot at this, Stone said, his voice low but intense. The Croth are preparing their second wave. This time we need to hit them hard. We're going to take the fight to their doorstep. Sir, we don't have enough ships for that, Lieutenant Morgan interjected. We'll be walking right into a slaughter. We're not going to face them head-on, Stone replied, his voice unwavering. We're going to hit them where it hurts. The Croth are proud. They're reckless with their confidence. If we can take down their command fleet, we can break their morale. Marcus raised an eyebrow. A risky move, sir, but if it works. Stone nodded. If it works, we win. If it doesn't, we've bought the rest of humanity enough time to regroup and survive. We're going to make them feel the weight of our wrath. Quinn entered the room, her face tight with resolve. I've sent word to the other fleets. They'll be ready to support us, but we'll be on our own when we strike. This is a one-way mission, and we can't afford to fail. Across the stars, the Croth were preparing. Their ships, massive and powerful, were being primed for the final assault on Earth. But their arrogance had already begun to show cracks. The humans had fought back. They had killed their pride, and in their minds they were no longer dealing with a weak species. They were facing something new, something dangerous. Captain Goran stood once again at the helm of his flagship, his fists clenched. They think they can win this. They think they can stop us. We'll show them why the Croth are unstoppable. But deep down there was a nagging fear, a fear that he couldn't shake. The humans weren't done yet. As both sides prepared for the next battle, one thing was certain. This war would not be like the others. The humans had proven their strength, their will to fight, and now the galaxy would see what happened when you pushed them too far. It was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for victory. And humanity wasn't going to lose. The Croth had underestimated humanity before. They had believed that one strike would be enough to break them. Now, after the first wave had failed and their forces were regrouping, their arrogance was beginning to crack. Earth's defiance had been a shock, something they hadn't anticipated, and it was something they could not ignore. Captain Goran stood on the command deck of his flagship, staring out into the cold void of space. The blackness seemed endless, and for a moment he felt small. His fleet had suffered severe losses, but the humans, those fragile emotional creatures, had proven that they were not just another race to crush. He clenched his fists. We will finish this, he muttered under his breath. His voice was like thunder, filled with the promise of vengeance. We will strike them down until they understand who we are. The command center around him was busy, officers moving with precision, preparing the ships for the final blow. Goran had ordered his fleet to remain steady, to show no weakness. This time they would leave no survivors. The humans would beg for mercy, and when they did, the Croth would not be kind. Ready the fleet, Goran ordered. We move out in 10, leave nothing standing. Back on Earth, the situation was dire. Admiral Rachel Quinn paced in the war room, her mind racing. The last battle had been a victory, but a costly one. The Kroth were still out there, and their second wave was coming. This time, they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating humanity. The war was about to become more brutal than anyone had anticipated. Admiral Morgan's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got a situation. The Kroth fleet is mobilizing. They're heading straight for Earth. We don't have the firepower to meet them head-on. We need reinforcements." Rachel's jaw tightened. There was no time for reinforcements. There was no time for waiting. The humans would have to face the Kroth on their own terms. "Get every ship we have ready for combat," she said, her voice cold. "We're not running. We're going to meet them in open space, and we're going to make them pay for every inch of ground they've taken." Lieutenant Marcus Calloway stood on the deck of the Resolute, watching as the last of the human warships made their final preparations. He was just one man in a sea of warriors, but he knew that the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. The Kroth had no mercy, and if humanity didn't strike first, they would be wiped out. Simple as that. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the controls of his fighter. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, a fire that burned inside him. He had seen what the Kroth were capable of, the destruction, the violence, but he had also seen what humanity was capable of, and if the Kroth wanted to learn that lesson the hard way, he would make sure they did. "We're not backing down, are we?" one of his fellow pilots asked, his voice strained but filled with determination. Marcus turned to him, offering a thin smile. "Not a chance. We're going to show them what happens when you wake the sleeping beast." The battle began without warning. The human fleet now gathered in the deep vacuum of space, prepared for the Kroth's arrival. Ships hummed with power, weapons charged and ready, but there was a heavy weight on everyone's shoulders. The Kroth had the advantage. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful. But humanity had something more precious: determination. Rachel stood at the front of the command center, her eyes fixed on the screen displaying the Kroth fleet's movements. It was vast, almost too much to comprehend. Hundreds of ships, each one capable of devastating entire cities, but Rachel didn't flinch. She had seen worse, had faced worse, and she had led humanity through it all. "Brace for impact," she said, her voice steady, but the weight of the moment was clear. "All ships engage the enemy on my command." A tremor ran through the ship as the first blast from the Kroth fleet hit. The Resolute rocked, but the crew held firm. They were not afraid, not anymore. In the heart of the battle, Marcus Calloway's fighter was a streak of light in the chaos. Dodging plasma blasts and weaving through enemy fire, he focused on one target, the flagship of the Kroth fleet. If they could take down Goran's flagship, they could cripple their enemy's command structure. "Lieutenant, we've got a lock on the flagship's shield," his navigator reported, her voice sharp with urgency. "We can breach it in 5 seconds." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Do it." The fighter's engines roared as it blasted forward. The Kroth flagship loomed ahead, massive and menacing. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The human fleet, small but relentless, fought like wolves circling their prey. The fighter's missile locked onto its target, and with a powerful burst it launched, striking the flagship's shields. The energy crackled and the Kroth ship staggered, losing its grip on the battle. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. But the Kroth retaliated, their massive weapons firing in response. The Resolute shuddered again as an explosion rocked its side. Rachel Quinn's grip tightened on the console. She could feel the weight of every decision she had made in that moment. "We can't take another hit like that," Morgan said from behind her, his voice taut with fear. "I know," Rachel replied, her voice calm despite the fear coursing through her. "But we're not going down today, not while there's breath left in our bodies." Back in the heart of the battle, the human fleet held its ground. The Kroth were bigger, stronger, but the humans had something the Kroth didn't: a deep, burning need to protect their home, their families, and their future. Every ship, every pilot fought with everything they had, their hearts beating in time with the pulse of the battle. The Kroth had thrown everything at them, but humanity was not backing down. Not now, not ever. The Resolute was heavily damaged, but it was still fighting. The crew was exhausted, but they would not stop. And in the midst of the chaos, there was a moment of clarity, a moment when the Kroth realized that humanity had become something more than they had ever anticipated. Captain Goran's voice crackled over the comms, strained with anger. "Push them back, push them all the way to Earth, show them what happens when they fight back." But it was too late. The human fleet had already turned the tide. The Kroth flagship, their pride and joy, was no longer in control. Their ships were scattered, their coordination falling apart as their command crumbled. Rachel's voice rang out across the comms, her voice steady but filled with the power of 1,000 warriors. "The battle is over. You've lost." The Kroth fleet faltered, their retreat inevitable. The damage had been done. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy would never be the same again. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had fought back. They had won. And for the first time, the galaxy began to understand something they had never truly believed before. Humans were not to be underestimated. The Croth had learned that lesson the hard way, and in the end, they would never make that mistake again. The battle above Earth had reached a fever pitch. The once-proud Croth fleet, shaken and battered, was beginning to retreat. Their ships had suffered unimaginable damage, their command structure had been shattered, and the human fleet, small but relentless, had delivered blow after blow, forcing them back. But Captain Goran was not one to give up easily. His pride was wounded, his confidence shaken, but his will remained unbroken. He knew that this wasn't over yet. The humans had won this round, but not the war. Goran's voice thundered through the communications channels of the Croth fleet. "Gather your strength, all of you. We will not run. We will not be beaten by a lesser species. We will return to finish what we started." His words were met with a grim silence. His officers exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no questioning him. The Croth had lost their flagship, and they had suffered more casualties than they had ever anticipated. But Goran, will was iron, and the fear of failure pushed him forward. "Prepare for the final assault," Goran growled. "We will destroy Earth, and we will crush these human rebels once and for all." On the ground below, the people of Earth watched in stunned silence as the remnants of the Croth fleet gathered. The news had spread like wildfire. Humanity had fought back, had won, but not without cost. The battle had been fierce, and the threat was not over. In Earth's command center, Admiral Rachel Quinn stood before the holographic map, her face set in determination. The battle had been hard fought, but they knew the Croth would not stop. Earth wasn't just a target anymore, it had become a symbol. If the Croth didn't destroy humanity now, they risked losing their dominance in the galaxy. "We need to prepare," Quinn said, her voice firm. "The Croth are coming back with everything they've got. They won't make the same mistake twice." Lieutenant Morgan, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, nodded. "We've sent out every available ship, Admiral, but we still don't have the firepower to match the Croth fleet." "I know," Quinn replied. She looked out the window, her eyes narrowing as she stared at the stars. "But we've got something they don't. We've got the will to win. We've got humanity's spirit, and I'm not going to let that go to waste." The human fleet, though smaller and outgunned, had become a force to be reckoned with. In the wake of the first wave, the fleet had begun to rally. Ships were repaired, crews were ready, and humanity was united. They knew what was at stake. Admiral Quinn stood at the front of the command center, her hand steady on the arm of her chair. "Prepare to launch. We hit them now while they're regrouping. We can't afford to let them get any stronger." Marcus Calloway, standing just a few feet away, had already suited up for the fight. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the controls on his fighter, but his mind was focused. The humans had fought back with everything they had, and now it was time to finish it. "Lieutenant, are you ready?" Quinn asked. Marcus turned toward her, his face set with the resolve of a warrior. "I'm ready. Let's finish this." The Croth fleet moved like a storm across the stars. Their ships, massive and imposing, gathered in an impenetrable formation. Captain Goran stood at the helm of his flagship, his fists clenched. He knew this would be their final assault, their last chance to crush humanity before they could regroup and strengthen their resolve. The Resolute was already moving, the last of humanity's warships ready for the final battle. As the human fleet closed in on the Croth formation, the tension in the air was palpable. The battle had begun. "All ships engage," Quinn's voice rang out over the comms. The first blast from the human fleet cut through the void like a lightning strike. It wasn't enough to pierce the Croth ship's shields, but it sent a message. The humans weren't going down without a fight. "We're not here to survive," Quinn said, her voice steady. "We're here to win, give them everything we've got." The battle raged like a storm. The human ships, though smaller and more vulnerable, fought with a ferocity that stunned the Croth. They attacked in waves, darting in and out of the Croth's massive shields, hitting weak points, striking fast and hard. For every blast the Croth fired, the humans retaliated tenfold, exploiting the smallest gaps in their enemies' defenses. Marcus Calloway's fighter streaked through the darkness of space, dodging plasma fire and missile barrages. His target was the heart of the Croth fleet, their command ship. If they could take it down, they could destroy the Croth's will to fight. His hands were steady on the controls, his breath coming in short bursts. "This is it," he muttered to himself. "Time to finish it." The Croth flagship loomed ahead, its massive form almost too big to comprehend. Marcus's fighter locked onto the target, and he fired. The missile streaked through the air, slamming into the Croth flagship's shields with a blinding flash of light. "Direct hit," his co-pilot reported, his voice filled with awe. But the Croth flagship didn't go down, not yet. Marcus's heart raced. We need to break their shields now. Back on Earth, Quinn watched the battle unfold from the command center. The human fleet was holding its ground, but the Croth were relentless. Their massive ships were relentless, and the firepower they unleashed seemed endless. But Quinn could see it, just a hint of vulnerability in their formation. The Croth were starting to crack. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. "We've got them," Quinn muttered under her breath. "We've got them." She stood up, her voice ringing out as she addressed the fleet. "This is it, everyone. This is the final strike. Push them back, give them everything you've got." In the heart of the battle, Marcus and the Resolute were pushing forward. The Croth flagship, battered but still formidable, was now struggling to maintain its position. The human fleet was closing in, each ship targeting weak points, forcing the Croth back. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he fired again, his fighters' weapons lighting up the darkness of space. This time, the shields on the Croth flagship flickered and failed. "Shields down," his co-pilot said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Now's our chance." Marcus didn't hesitate. He locked onto the flagship's exposed core and fired everything he had. The explosion that followed was deafening, even across the comms. The Croth flagship disintegrated in a burst of fire and debris, a massive chain reaction tearing it apart. Captain Goran watched in horror as his flagship was reduced to nothing. His command structure was destroyed. His fleet was crumbling. The humans had done it. They had broken him. "Retreat," Goran barked, his voice filled with defeat. "Pull back, we've lost." The Croth fleet, broken and leaderless, began to retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of their once proud ships. The battle was over. Admiral Quinn stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the screen as the last of the Croth ships turned and fled. The human fleet, battered and broken but unyielding, had won. "We did it," Morgan said, his voice thick with emotion. Quinn nodded, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. "Yes, we did, but we've only just begun. This is our galaxy now." The humans had won. The Croth had learned their lesson the hard way, and the galaxy would never again forget the strength and fury of humanity. The war had ended, but the echoes of the battle still vibrated through the stars. The Croth fleet had retreated, broken and scattered, its leadership shattered. The humans had won. Against all odds, Earth had stood tall, facing down the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known. The cost had been high, the toll on Earth and its people immeasurable, but humanity had emerged victorious. Now, across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Croth had been defeated, and humanity had proven itself more than capable of holding its ground. It was a victory that no one had expected, a victory that sent shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. On Earth, the celebrations were muted, marked by a sense of relief more than triumph. Yes, they had won, but at what cost? Cities lay in ruins, thousands of lives had been lost, the scars of the battle were everywhere. But there was also something else, something that had been forged in the heart of humanity's darkest hour, a sense of unity, of purpose, and of an unyielding will to survive. Admiral Rachel Quinn stood in the command center, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Her eyes were tired, the weight of the last few days pressing on her shoulders. She had led humanity through the fire, but the battle had only just begun. The Croth were defeated, but they would not be the last threat humanity faced. The galaxy had seen their strength, and now they would be watching, waiting. "We've won, but this isn't over," Quinn muttered to herself, as if speaking to the stars themselves. Lieutenant Morgan, standing beside her, nodded. "The galaxy's going to change. There's no going back. We've sent a message, and they've heard it." Far from Earth, in the vast reaches of space, the news of the Croth defeat had already reached the ears of countless alien species. Some were watching with curiosity, others with fear, and still more with disdain. The Galactic Council, once dismissive of humanity, was now gripped by uncertainty. For the first time, they were forced to confront the undeniable truth. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Varun, the Surix diplomat who had pleaded with the Council to take humanity seriously, was on a different planet now, his heart heavy. He had warned them, had tried to make them understand, but no one had listened. Now the Croth were beaten, and humanity was at the forefront of the galaxy's consciousness. The Surix had always been a proud, advanced race, but they were not invincible. Varun had seen what the humans could do. He had watched as the Surix, in their arrogance, had underestimated humanity's potential. They had seen the humans as a nuisance, a race of fragile creatures unworthy of their attention. But that had changed in the blink of an eye. Varun stood at the edge of a balcony, looking out over the alien cityscape. The stars seemed farther away now, colder, as though the universe itself had shifted. The fear of humanity had spread far and wide, and with it, a new reality. one in which Earth was no longer a backwater planet but a rising power, capable of toppling even the most powerful civilizations. The Surix had underestimated them, and now the galaxy would have to live with the consequences. On a planet far from Earth, in a dark, quiet council chamber, the leaders of the Galactic Council gathered. They had been in emergency session for days, deliberating on the new reality that had unfolded before them. The Kroth's defeat had shaken them to their core, and there was an undeniable tension in the air. The humans, once seen as insignificant, were now the new power in the galaxy. "I told you," Varun's voice echoed through the chamber. "We should have listened. The humans are not what we thought. They are strong, resourceful, and they will fight to the death to protect their own. If we do not respect that strength, we risk our own survival." A tall, slender being with translucent skin from the Zaxar race leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. "We have heard your warnings, Varun, but we cannot allow Earth to rise unchecked. They are a threat to the balance of power in the galaxy." "Balance of power?" Varun scoffed. "What balance? The Kroth were the balance, and they've been crushed by a species that should have been nothing more than prey." The Zaxar leader, who had been silent until now, spoke. "What do you propose, then? We let the humans roam free across the stars, conquering and expanding at will. Their victory may have been unexpected, but they have proven their might. We cannot ignore that. We must act." The room fell silent as the leaders exchanged glances. Varun knew what was coming. The council would not allow humanity to go unchecked. They would make a move, and it would come soon. The question was, would humanity be ready for the storm that was coming? Back on Earth, Quinn had already begun making preparations. There was no time for celebration. The victory over the Kroth was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, and now they were watching to see if humanity would crumble or rise to the challenge. As Earth's military began to rebuild and reinforce its fleet, Quinn gathered her most trusted officers around her. She needed to be ready for whatever came next. The Kroth had been their first test, but now there were other forces in play, other threats waiting to strike. "We've proven ourselves," Quinn said, her voice steady but with an edge of determination. "But we're not done yet. The galaxy will come for us, and we need to be ready. We're not just defending Earth anymore, we're defending the future of humanity." Morgan nodded, his expression grim. "The Kroth were just the beginning. If they come for us again, we need to be ready to fight back. We won't survive another war like this if we're not prepared." "I agree," Quinn replied. "But we can't just wait for them to come. We need to take the fight to them. We need to make sure the galaxy understands what happens when they challenge us." In the days that followed, as Earth prepared for the challenges ahead, the rest of the galaxy watched. The fear that had taken root after the defeat of the Kroth spread like wildfire. Every species, every empire, now knew that humanity was no longer just a footnote in the galaxy's history. They had earned their place, and it was a place of power, of strength, of fear. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity fought back. And as Earth's fleet grew stronger, its resolve unshakable, the question remained: would the galaxy accept humanity's rise, or would they try to crush it before it could grow? One thing was certain: humanity was no longer just a part of the galaxy's story. They were the story. And the rest of the galaxy would have to decide how they would respond to a new, unstoppable force. The fear of humanity had spread, and it was only just beginning. The silence was deafening. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Humanity had fought back and won. They had stood up to the Kroth, a power unlike anything the galaxy had seen, and sent them fleeing in defeat. But now Earth stood at the edge of something far bigger, something no one had ever seen before. Admiral Rachel Quinn stood alone in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. The lights flickered overhead as the deep hum of the systems filled the room. It had been weeks since the battle, weeks since the Kroth had fled, and yet the weight of what had happened felt as fresh as it had that day. Humanity had won, but at what cost? Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the map. Earth had been ravaged, its cities broken, its people scarred by the war. The human fleet, battered but still intact, was stronger than it had ever been, but the Kroth weren't the only threat they faced now. Every other power in the galaxy had watched the conflict unfold, and they were all thinking the same thing: what next? "We're not just defending Earth anymore," Quinn muttered to herself. "We're defending everything we've built, everything we are." Beside her, Lieutenant Morgan watched her, knowing the pressure she was under. "Admiral, we've got reports from every front. Some systems are beginning to rebuild, but many of the galaxy's powers are still unsure of what to make of humanity. Some fear us, others, they want to see if we'll fall." Quinn's eyes darkened. The fear she'd seen in the Kroth, the fear that had burned through their fleets as they fled from Earth, was now spreading across the stars. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They weren't the small, insignificant race they had once been. They had risen from nothing and shattered a galaxy-wide expectation. "We won't fall," Quinn said, her voice firm, almost as if she were speaking to herself more than to Morgan. "We've shown them what we're capable of, but that's not enough. We need to show them who we are." In the far reaches of space, Varun, the Surix diplomat, had just received an urgent communication. His hands shook slightly as he read the message from the Galactic Council. The Kroth defeat was a mark of something bigger. The news of humanity's strength had already spread, and the Council was no longer dismissing the humans as a simple nuisance. They feared what they might become. "We were wrong," Varun whispered to himself. "The humans aren't just strong, they are resilient, they are dangerous." He had seen it firsthand. The humans had faced unimaginable odds, yet they had not only survived, they had thrived. And now, as word of their victory spread, other races were watching closely, waiting to see if humanity would rise even higher or burn out like a dying star. The Surix, once confident in their place among the stars, now faced a harsh truth. Humanity was no longer just a species to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with. But the question was, would the galaxy accept humanity's rise, or would they crush it before it could grow any stronger? Across the galaxy, in a dark, towering citadel, the members of the Galactic Council convened in a secretive meeting. The Kroth were not the only ones who had underestimated humanity. Now, they had to decide what to do about the humans' unexpected victory. The Council, a vast body of species from all corners of the galaxy, had watched as humanity had clawed its way out of their cradle on Earth and shown the might of their will. The Zaxar leader, long respected for their strategic brilliance, stood at the front of the room. "We cannot ignore this threat any longer," he said, his voice booming through the chamber. "The humans have shown that they will not be subjugated. They have defeated the Kroth, the most powerful military force in the galaxy. They are a force of nature, and we cannot let them grow unchecked." A representative from the Arcali's race, known for their stealth and cunning, spoke up. "They are unpredictable. They act with heart, not strategy. That is their strength, but it is also their weakness. If we confront them, we may have an advantage." The Surix diplomat Varun stood in the corner of the room, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "You do not understand. The humans will not back down. They will fight for their survival, for their freedom, and they will not bend. If we face them, they will not give up until they have won. We must approach them carefully, do not provoke them further." The room fell into a tense silence. The decision was made. The galaxy had to act. If humanity was allowed to continue unchallenged, there would be no stopping them. The fear had already spread, and with it, the certainty that humanity's rise was unstoppable. Back on Earth, Admiral Quinn was preparing for the worst. She had seen the fear in the eyes of the galaxy's leaders. She knew what was coming, the calm before the storm, but she also knew something else: the humans would not be intimidated, not this time. "The other species are watching us," Quinn said, her voice steady. "They're afraid. They see us as a threat, but they're also trying to figure out if we can be controlled." "We can't control them, Admiral," Morgan replied, his voice firm. "We have to show them that humanity isn't something to be feared. We're here to stay." Quinn nodded slowly. "We've shown them what we can do, but now we need to show them what we will do. We need to prove that Earth isn't just a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. We're a force that will define this era." Across the galaxy, the first waves of humanity's reach were already being felt. As Earth's fleets expanded into space, new colonies were established, and humanity's influence began to grow. But the rest of the galaxy wasn't going to sit idly by. While many of the smaller species watched, wary but uncertain, the larger, more powerful empires were preparing their own strategies. The Council had decided humanity could not be left unchecked. They would be watched, tested, and, if necessary, confronted. The fear that humanity had sparked in the galaxy was now becoming a reality. But Earth wasn't backing down. Quinn had made sure of that. Humanity had learned from the Kroth. They had learned how to fight, how to adapt, how to survive. In the depths of space, Captain Goran, now exiled and humiliated, watched from the shadows as his once mighty Kroth fleet drifted in ruin. He had been a leader of the greatest war machine the galaxy had ever known, but humanity had broken them. He had never believed in the human capacity for resistance, but now he understood. "Humans," Goran muttered, "they are more than a threat. They are a force that will change everything." And he was right. Humanity's war with the Kroth had been only the beginning. The galaxy now knew their name, but what would happen next was not yet clear. What was clear, however, was this: the age of humanity had begun. The galaxy had learned to fear them. The question was no longer whether humanity would rise, but how far they would rise, and whether the rest of the galaxy would accept them, or try to destroy them before they could. Humanity had won this battle, but the war for their place in the stars had just begun. And this time, humanity wasn't asking for permission. The galaxy would never forget the day the humans rose, and the stars would tremble from the fear they left in their wake.